Story 1. This all took place 5 years ago. At that time, I had just purchased my first house but told no one about it. I wasn't even dating at this time. It was a huge 3-bedroom townhouse well outside the nearest city, and it came with 10 acres of land. Somehow, word got around that I had just bought a house, even though I hadn't even moved in yet. It wasn't long before my entitled aunt found out and apparently made plans to move in and live there, despite the fact I hadn't even moved in. Soon after, I got a call from her. The first thing out of her mouth without even a hello was, "Make sure I have a key when I arrive to move in." I was taken aback. "Excuse me, move in?" "Yes, I'm going to live there, and I'll allow you to live there too, as long as you don't cause issues or get loud," she replied. I told her, "No, you're not moving into my house, and you'll be thrown out if you try." She dismissed my response as if my words were meaningless and said, "I'm packing my stuff now, and I'll be there first thing tomorrow. You better have my key ready then." With that, she hung up. I immediately called the police, who put me in touch with the local sheriff's department. I explained the situation, and they assured me they would have a patrol check the property from time to time. They would run off anyone who wasn't supposed to be there and arrest those who refused to leave. As it turns out, my entitled aunt tried to go to the property that night to drop off some of her belongings. She was caught by the patrol and told to leave. When she claimed it was her house, they informed her it wasn't, and that the owner didn't want anyone on the property. They had to threaten to arrest her before she finally left. About an hour later, at around 11 p.m., she called my phone, yelling about the sheriff running her off. I simply hung up on her and unplugged my phone for the night. The next morning, I plugged my phone back in around 4 a.m. and found my voicemail box full of repeated messages from her, demanding to know how dare I not answer my phone and have her run off from her house. Yes, she actually said, her house. Later that morning, I called the sheriff again and requested an officer be at the house in case she returned. We arranged a time for my arrival. When I got there, a sheriff met me at the house. Less than 30 minutes later, my entitled aunt arrived with a carload of her personal items and immediately walked up to me, demanding her key. "You're not getting a key, and you're not living here, no matter what you think," I told her. She blew up at this point, shouting that it was her house and she was going to live there whether I wanted her to or not. I just smiled, closed the door in front of her, and locked it. She, of course, tried to grab the keys from me, which I simply put in my pocket. I then told her, "Tell that to the sheriff standing behind you." She screamed, "This is nonsense. You're not keeping me out of my house." I looked past her and said, "See? What did I tell you?" At that moment, a stern voice from behind her said, "Ma'am, you have to leave the property, or you will be arrested for trespassing." She turned with a sour look on her face, ready to unleash another tirade, but instead, she made a strangled sound, and her face went white as a sheet. The sheriff said, "Ma'am, this man does not want you on his property. As of now, you are considered trespassing and will be arrested if you refuse to leave and cease harassing this gentleman." Before she could leave, I added, "Just because you want something doesn't mean you're going to get it. Such is my new house. If I ever see you on my property again without my permission, I will have you arrested and have your car towed at your expense." If looks could kill, I'd be dead several times over from the glares she gave me. She then left, making an obscene gesture on her way to the car, which prompted a sharp rebuke from the sheriff. To this day, she has been going around telling anyone who will listen that I robbed her of her new house and how she's going to get her house back someday. That's going to be a problem for her, though. Since then, I've improved the property and sold it for a tidy profit to a really nice but no-nonsense couple. I then bought a new property with more acreage, about 25 more acres, and no one is telling her where I moved. She did try sneaking back onto the property about 3 months after I sold it. The couple's husband nearly got into a confrontation with her because she came around midnight, intending to sneak in through an open window or something. This time, she spent about 30 days in jail, completed 100 hours of community service, and was given 3 years of probation, plus fees and court costs, for trespassing on private property and attempting to enter a private residence without permission. Her entitlement knew no bounds, but she ultimately learned a necessary lesson when she realized she wasn't going to get her way with me. From what I've been told, she's calmed down somewhat but still acts entitled and is actively trying to find out where I live. Story 2. My wife and I are senior citizens, which is a polite way of saying we're old. My dear wife is a strong, independent woman who doesn't take nonsense from anyone, and I adore her for it. She keeps me in line, pushes me to be a better man, and is the reason behind my modest success in life. She's sarcastic, incredibly smart, and, as she gets older, her filter is practically non-existent. A few months ago, we decided to treat ourselves and made reservations at a rather high-end restaurant. They had a maitre d', sommeliers, highly trained wait staff, and all the works. My wife, even though she's in her 70s, has very little gray hair and can easily pass for 55. She was wearing a very pretty white, lacy blouse, flattering black pants, and black flats. She looked great. When we arrived, there was no line surprisingly, and the maitre d' had apparently stepped away from the podium where he usually stands. We were waiting there, with my wife standing next to the podium and me sitting on one of the benches provided by the entrance, when another couple walked in. Without missing a beat, the man walked up to the podium and addressed my wife, saying, "Rockefeller, not the name he used, we have reservations for 2. My wife calmly replied that she was sure someone would be with them shortly. The woman huffed a little, and the man insisted, "Please seat us now." My wife told them that she was also waiting to be seated, but the man repeated, "Seat us now." So my wife, with a slight smirk, said, "Right away, walk this way." She then led them around the partition separating the entrance from the dining area, circled back to the other end, and led them right back to the entrance. Pointing to the bench where I was sitting, she said, "Sit down." The man looked like he was going to explode, and my wife repeated, "I don't work here, you fool. You wanted me to seat you, so sit down." As the couple stood there sputtering, and before things could escalate, the maitre d' returned. We gave our name, and he led us to our table. There were no yelling and no threats of police. We had a wonderful meal, though it was overpriced, but oh well, and the other couple was seated several tables away from us. We didn't interact with them again, but they did shoot us dirty looks now and then. Now, before you think my wife overreacted and could have explained that she didn't work there in a better way, let me tell you she has a wicked sense of humor and no tolerance for foolishness. She loves being snarky and is excellent at it. One of the reasons I still love being put in my place by her after all these years is that she keeps me from getting too full of myself. Story 3. I was in Target today, looking for lotion for my dry hands, when I overheard a conversation in the next aisle over. The next aisle was the makeup section. All the employees were spread out, stocking shelves and disinfecting everything. A lady was browsing the makeup and apparently started opening products to test on her skin. An employee rushed over and exclaimed, "Please don't do that again. I have to damage this item out now because it touched your skin." "Well, I was testing it. There aren't any testers for this," the lady replied. "Please don't open any more products," the employee insisted. "We took out all the testers." "How am I supposed to test them then?" the lady asked, sounding frustrated. "You can't test them. Please don't open any more products," the employee repeated firmly. After that, I decided to leave. I didn't see what the lady was testing, but I know it was in the makeup aisle. You can make your own guesses about what was going on. Story 4. This is a story I've kept to myself and my close family. It happened over 19 years ago, and I still can't believe they thought it was okay. At the time of this incident, my husband and I had been married for just over 2 years. I was 25 at the time. I never had a good relationship with my step-grandparents because I wasn't their blood relation, so they didn't really think of me as a real person. My mother had divorced my father and then married his best friend, with whom she had a child. I was 11 when my youngest sister was born, so you can understand that these people had known me for 15 years by this time. I hadn't had anything to do with my step-grandparents since I turned 18, not out of malice, but simply because I worked a lot and was in school. When I was 22, my husband and I got married. We kind of eloped. I had planned a big wedding, but everything fell through at the last minute, so we got married on the date I had picked and had our honeymoon at the same time. Only my husband's family could afford to go with us. Fast forward a few years, and I gave birth to my first child, a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl. My daughter was probably about a week, maybe 2 weeks old at the time when I got a call from my step-grandparents asking about my new baby. I thought it was just a casual call to check in and see how things were going with the baby. They then started asking me what she looked like, so I told them. They thought that was wonderful. Then they asked me what her name was. She had a gender-neutral name, but of course, they didn't like that and kept insisting that it needed to be changed. I told them that was the name I gave her because I liked it. Then they started talking about how I was going to send my daughter on a plane to visit them. I was a bit taken aback, to say the least. I kindly informed them that I wasn't going to put a newborn on a plane to go visit grandparents. They told me that they would have someone come to pick her up at the airport and that all I had to do was sign the papers. I asked, "What papers are you talking about?" They told me they needed custody papers because they needed to take her to the doctor when she arrived. I informed them that she had already been seen by doctors and had all her vaccines. Now, I hadn't spoken to them in over 4 years, and they were asking me to go to the airport, sign custody papers, and put my daughter on a plane with a stranger. I kindly informed them that I wasn't doing any such thing. My daughter needed to be with her mother because I was breastfeeding her, which was what was best for her. They told me that I needed to stop breastfeeding and put her on a bottle so that she would be ready for the trip. I had to tell them, no, my daughter is not getting on a plane to go visit relatives in another state without her mother. They insisted that I just sign the papers and send her with a stranger. They even said that I could have more children later, as I was young and could have children when I got married. I informed them that I was married, and my husband and I were not putting our child on a plane to go see relatives in another state when she was less than 2 weeks old. The conversation started to go downhill from there. My step-grandmother started yelling at me, saying that I was ruining it for her daughter, that her daughter would take better care of a baby than I could. She said that I was stealing her only chance to have a baby, that I was selfish, self-centered, egotistical, arrogant, and rude, and that I could have a child when I was ready to take care of one. She said I was too young and needed to grow up, stop lying, and wait until I was married to have a baby. She insisted that this was what was best for everybody and that I was going back on my word. They then informed me that they were recording the call and that a lawyer would be looking into it, claiming that I had somehow agreed to let them take my baby and was now reneging on that agreement. Mind you, I hadn't spoken to these people in over 4 years, and I had no idea what they were talking about. My step-grandmother then informed me that I was disgusting for breastfeeding my child and that I needed to give her a bottle like a normal person. She said I needed to just bring the baby to the airport and sign the custody papers. She accused me of denying my baby doctor's visits because I was supposedly too poor to afford them. My husband has insurance through his work, so I have no idea where they got that information. She then suggested that I could pump breast milk and send it to them, and they would pay me for it since I supposedly needed money because I was so poor. She implied that if money was the reason I wasn't sending my baby, they would at least pay me for the milk. However, she insisted that I somehow owed them my baby because the baby had blonde hair and blue eyes. It was just what her daughter had wanted her entire life. I was a child and couldn't raise a child. They claimed I had told them I would give them my baby, which I absolutely did not, and was now lying to get money. What in the world? I ended up telling them exactly how I felt about them. I told them I was not going to put my baby, whom I had with my husband, on a plane to visit step-grandparents and a step-aunt who never really considered me family. I also made it clear that my step-aunt straight up hated me and had made it very well known. When I was a child, my step-aunt told me to my face that I was worthless and nothing. She claimed my father divorced my mother because he couldn't stand me. I actually know for a fact that my mother divorced my father. I witnessed the abuse my mother suffered from my father. She divorced him because of that. I also told my step-grandparents that I would never let my step-aunt see my daughter because she was so cruel to me when all I ever wanted was to be friends with her. All I ever wanted was grandparents who loved and cared about me, but they made it very clear that they never would. I refused to subject my family to any more of this abuse. They started calling me all kinds of names, saying they were going to sue me and get custody of my child whether I liked it or not. They claimed I was an unfit single mother living in a bad lifestyle. I informed them that just because they didn't see me with their own eyes getting married didn't mean I wasn't married. Things happen every day without their eyes being upon them. I told them they were delusional for thinking they could just take my baby without me having any say in it. I told them never to call me again. This whole event was so emotional for me that, for many years, I worried that someone would come and try to take my daughter from me. I became very protective of her. I wouldn't let anyone babysit her. I now know that these were just unreasonable people trying to get what they wanted. But how in the world they thought they were going to take my child is beyond me. By the way, don't worry, I have no contact with these unreasonable people. No lawyer or anything ever came of all their threats. I just wanted to share this story and get it off my chest.